Beneath the blinding sun of a forgotten coastline, 68 men waited. They built fires, they rationed food, they believed rescue was coming. But when help finally arrived, there was no one left to rescue. April 1656. The Veraldra, a 260-ton vessel, armed with silver, spices, and seasoned sailors, was meant to conquer oceans, not be consumed by them. She had braved the stormy Atlantic, skirted Africa's Horn, and entered the Indian Ocean with her hull heavy and crew weary. But her final mistake wasn't made in battle. It was made in the dark, just off the unseen reefs of a land barely mapped. New Holland. A deafening crack split the night. Jagged coral rose like blades beneath the waves. In moments, timber shattered. Cargo spilled, and the Veraldra pride of the Dutch East India Company began to die. Only 75 men, battered and bleeding, dragged themselves onto the shore of what is now Western Australia. No town, no path, no promise of rescue. Just emptiness, miles of sand dunes and wind-blasted cliffs. The captain, Harry's Johnch, made a choice no one should have to make. He took 7 of the strongest, launched a splintered longboat, and sailed north minus 1,400 miles of raw ocean between them and Batavia. It was a desperate gamble, but the only one they had. The rest, 68 men, remained behind. They built a camp with what little wreckage they could recover. They waited, watching the sea for sails. They counted the days, then silence. Weeks later, miraculously, Janch arrived in Batavia, dehydrated, half dead, but alive. His story horrified the Dutch authorities, who immediately dispatched a rescue mission. It was months before they returned to the same coastline. But when they arrived, the camp was deserted. No survivors, no graves, no signs of a struggle. Just quiet sand, wind, and absence. Their fires had long gone cold. Blankets, tools, and supplies lay scattered like they'd been dropped mid-task, never to be picked up again. The only thing missing was them. What could have happened? Australian wilderness is merciless. No fresh water, no steady food, brutal heat by day, freezing wind by night. Some believe the men died of starvation, thirst, or exposure, their remains lost to time and sand. But then where were the bodies? Not a single bone, not a trace. Others whisper that they tried to sail away on makeshift rafts swallowed by the Indian Ocean without a scream. But a deeper, darker question emerged. What if something or someone took them? In the years that followed, more rescue missions came. More searches. More heartbreak. Each expedition returned with the same report. Nothing. The wreck of the Veraldra remained broken and salt-stained in shallow water. But the men? They had vanished as though the earth itself had swallowed them whole. The Dutch gave up. The ocean won. The mystery remained. But 2 centuries later, clues began to surface. 200 years after the disappearance, strange coins surfaced from the sand. Not Dutch, but Spanish, older than the wreck itself, and near them, a cryptic ring of stones. Pointing inland like a silent message from the vanished, the year was 1875. A British explorer, scouring the wilds of Western Australia, stumbled upon something that should not have been there. Far from any settlement 2 miles inland from the unforgiving coastline, he found a circle of stones. Not random, not natural. Deliberate. 2 rectangular shapes within the ring. Aligned, balanced, and one of them angled like an arrow. It wasn't Aboriginal in style. It wasn't geological. It was placed by whom? And why? When rediscovered. Decades later, in 1938, one archaeologist described it not just as a structure, but as a signal. A marker, perhaps left behind for rescuers who never came. Or as a trail left by men who vanished without a trace. But the mystery only deepened. In 1931, Fred and Alistair Edwards, 2 brothers walking the dunes north of Seabird, unearthed 40 silver coins. Worn but intact. Spanish reals, minted between 1618 and 1655. And they weren't alone. In 1938, schoolchildren from the Barber-assisted school discovered even more of the same coins nearby. Just beneath the sands, But the Veraldra was a Dutch ship. So how did Spanish treasure end up buried in dunes where Dutch sailors were last seen? One theory began to form, whispered at first, then more boldly repeated. The men had not died. They had disappeared into the land itself. It is believed that when the 68 castaways lost hope for rescue, they may have done the unthinkable, abandoned the coast and ventured inland. A journey into the unknown, across hostile terrain, unfamiliar ecosystems, and a landscape untouched by European maps. If they moved with purpose, they might have carried the most precious cargo with them: silver coins, salvaged from the wreck. A resource for trade. A relic of hope. And if they encountered anyone, it would have been the land's first people. Some Aboriginal oral traditions tell stories of strange visitors from the sea, pale men who spoke in foreign tongues, brought metal and left no lasting trace. There is no definitive proof. But the possibility lingers. What if the castaways were taken in by the local tribes? What if they lived and died among them, their identities swallowed into the dreamtime? So, it would be one of the earliest and most profound contacts between European sailors and Australia's Indigenous peoples. But not everyone believes in peaceful endings. Another theory is far darker, that the survivors, desperate and starving, split into factions. That madness set in. That betrayal bloomed under a burning sky. There are legends unconfirmed of a white ghost tribe wandering inland. Some Aboriginal groups have passed down stories of violent strangers, or men who came from the sea and vanished just as quickly. Were they welcomed, or were they warned? The official discovery of the Veraldra's wreck in 1963, lying in shallow waters off the very coast where the men vanished, confirmed only one thing: the ship had been real. But the treasure the men had salvaged? Still missing? And no remains? Not one skeleton ever uncovered. The land gives up nothing. Some modern researchers suggest more grounded explanations. Maybe the coins were from another shipwreck. Maybe the stone ring was Aboriginal in origin, misunderstood by European eyes. Maybe everything we've seen are coincidences, dots connected by our own desire to make sense of the void. But even science must admit, this is a mystery with no ending. What makes this story so haunting is not just that men vanished. It's that their absence was complete. No messages, no final words. Just a void haunting the coast like a ghost. Today, the beaches of Western Australia remain quiet. Waves crash where lifeboats once launched. The sun scorches the dunes where coins still shimmer beneath the surface. Somewhere deep beneath the sand or etched into cave walls, the truth may still sleep. But for now, the Veraldra's crew remains part of the land, lost not just to time, but to the wild silence of a continent that does not give back its secrets easily. Maybe they died. Maybe they lived. Maybe they became something else entirely. And maybe the greatest mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only felt in the wind, the waves, the spaces where people once stood, but no longer do. They search the cliffs, the caves, the endless scrub. No blood, no bones, no goodbyes. Just the sense that something ancient had taken them and refused to let go. Years passed, and decades, and centuries, and still not one man from the Veraldra was ever seen again. The Dutch East India Company tried. Several expeditions were sent, combing the jagged coast and harsh inland terrain. They walked the desert barefoot, followed the cliffs by torchlight, and peered into caves like mouths waiting to whisper a secret. But there were no signs of life. No scattered remains, no graves, no answers, only silence. The ship remained, its skeleton half buried in coral and tide. But the men, gone. And so something unexpected happened. The story of the Veraldra began to slip from official record, drift into something deeper. Legend. By the early 1800s, Australian settlers along the west coast spoke of ghost sailors wandering the dunes under the wall. Moonlight, some claimed they'd seen pale figures in tattered uniforms walking the shore barefoot, bearded, silently watching. Children were told not to stray near the wreck, lest the lost crew mistake them for replacements. And among some Aboriginal elders, There remained stories not always shared with outsiders of white-skinned men who came from the sea, carrying metal and sickness, who entered the land and never left. Who were they? Ghosts, strangers, or the echoes of something very real? In the 20th century, as archaeology developed, there was a flicker of renewed interest. A few coins, a stone ring, a wreck, rediscovered enough to ignite the imagination, but not enough to solve the puzzle. Some researchers proposed a radical theory that the castaways became invisible not through death, but by transformation, that they were absorbed into the vastness of the land, its people, its rhythms, that their fate was not extinction, but erasure. After all, what happens to men when the world stops looking for them? Think of it. You're one of the 68. You've watched your captain vanish into the horizon. Your rations are dwindling. The fire you built has gone out. At every morning you wake up, the coastline looks exactly the same. Empty, hostile, silent. Then one day, a decision is made. You will leave not to escape, but to disappear. Imagine wandering inland, your boots splitting open, your skin blistered, carrying silver that means nothing to the birds watching from the trees. Imagine meeting people who've lived here for tens of thousands of years, who know where to find water from stone, who understand this place not as a prison, but as home. Would you beg for help? Would you offer the coins in your pocket? Would you trade your language for survival? Would you forget who you were, to become someone new? And what if that's exactly what happened? Modern geneticists have quietly speculated whether traces of Dutch DNA exist in remote Aboriginal communities along the West Coast. Nothing conclusive has surfaced. The question lingers, because there have been isolated accounts secondhand, often unverified, of Aboriginal individuals with unusual features, lighter hair, unfamiliar dialects, or knowledge of strange artifacts. Coincidence? Colonial misremembering? Or distant whispers of the Veraldra echoing through bloodlines? Others believe the answer lies deeper still in the land itself. The Western Australian coast is rich in ancient power. Sacred sites, songlines, and stone. Carvings far older than the Veraldra. Perhaps the men disturbed something older than empire. Perhaps they entered a place where being found was never an option. And perhaps the reason they were never seen again is because they never truly left. Cinematic climax in 1963. The bones of the Veraldra were found finally in shallow waters, its ribs splayed like the fingers of a drowning hand. But not a single coin. Not a scrap of cloth, not a human tooth. And so the mystery remained whole, untouched. It is said that history remembers victors, but sometimes it remembers nothing at all. And those stories, the ones with no ending, are the ones that haunt us most. The Veraldra is 68. Men became something more than lost. They became possibility. Possibility that somewhere, in an old cave or under a forgotten tree, lies the answer. Possibility that a child today carries the echo of their voice. Possibility that the truth was never meant to be found, only felt beneath the shifting sands of Western Australia. Under a sky they never understood, 68 men waited, and somewhere they still are.